Well, here we are again. Thank you for being here. Today, I want to get 2 items marked off that to-do list, both related to the fuel system. You know, last time my progress was cut a little bit short because I couldn't find these 2 little fuel fittings. These are AN style hose ends. I couldn't find them, but here they are. So I'm going to get these installed and hopefully get some fuel flowing today in this car. Yeah.
Garage time.
Okay, rather than bringing the other lift post around here and screwing it to the floor, I'm going to go back to the tire stands. These lift stands will go higher, but for what I need to do under the car, this is probably sufficient. There's pretty good access here to the back. These are just slightly quicker than, configuring the max jacks because only one of the posts is secured to the ground at all times. There are steel braids inside this hose, and so the cleanest way I found to cut it is with the cutoff wheel. I'm sure that's probably not the best way, but I just blow it out and go with that. No frays on the end. Now, if you do a lot of these, you should invest in the special jaws for the vise. I think there's some aluminum jaws. I don't have those. The jaws on this vise are steel and they're smooth. But what I'm going to do is just put a little tape on the fitting. This is electrical tape. And then this part, what I do is I have kind of an older screwdriver. It's a little bit rounded and dull on the ends. So I just start it in kind of on an angle like that. I just take the screwdriver, I poke it down inside, get all the braid you can down inside the hole. And then once it's started, I like to look inside there and see how far I need to go. You really want the rubber portion of the hose to be really close to the threads. So in this case, I find it easier just to kind of maybe put a towel down or something on the vise here, and then just work those braids and work the hose into the fitting. And I just like to rotate it around as I go. All right, I don't think you're gonna be able to see this on camera. I'll try to take a picture, but I can see the end of the hose is right there at the threads. And then this side of the fitting has this portion that goes inside the hose, and then it's gonna spread it open as it threads in here, and that's what creates the seal. Then back in the vise, so we can wrench on this thing. Now I actually got the right AN wrench, but of course it's too small. This is a size 6, but for whatever reason, these fittings I got, maybe they're Chinese, the wrench doesn't fit, so I got to use the traditional wrenches. I think it's 5/8. No, it's 18 millimeters, which is really kind of strange. I don't think, well, this is 18 millimeters here, and then this is something a little different. Really weird. You know, AN stands for Army Navy, so I don't think the Army would be using 18 on this. So this is just aftermarket motorsport stuff. They really kind of change all the standards. Oh well. Finally got a wrench that's going to fit on here. It's actually 3/4 on this big portion. So just go round and round. And then I like to leave a little space here, like a 1/16 of an inch or so between these two fittings. So right there, it's about a 1/16 of an inch. I can always go tighter, but to get started, I leave that little gap right there. So with the tape removed, it's not really scratched up at all. This is the return line, and that's the new fitting. Everything's running up here into these factory kind of eyelets, and then it's going up here. This line here goes to the regulator. This is the supply line. This is the return line. And then this is the side that goes here to the engine. I fitted some gauges, and also I'm running a secondary regulator for carburetors. This one here will be for EFI eventually. This goes down to, I think, about 10 PSI, and then this one here can go down to like 2 PSI. So I've rigged it up just temporarily so we can measure some pressures. I'm gonna put a hose clamp on that one. This side would go to one carburetor, and then this side would go to the other carburetor, and this isn't the real lines. This is just for testing. This gauge here is between 0 and 10, so we want to read about 2.5 PSI for my particular carburetors. I think the time has come to put some gas in this thing. This is another big milestone. I think I got everything tight, but probably not. I'm sure there's going to be a leak somewhere. There's a lot of connections. I tested the tunnel lines separately to make sure the flares were okay, but I can't remember if I cinched down the fittings after I poked it through the tunnel. So if anywhere it's going to leak, it's probably going to be those. But let's just give it a try. Get a smaller funnel. There's really no gasket here between this interface, so that's something that I need to create. Should have thought of that before I dumped in the fuel. Probably could have dumped it in there and avoided a spill, but now we know. These are the terminals for the fuel pump, so I'm going to wire this direct to a battery and not going to wire it to the ignition switch just yet. I just wanted to check the fuel pressure. I will be adding a fuel pump relay and also its own dedicated wiring harness for this. But for right now, I'm just going to jumper it with some wires. We've got a few wires attached to the plus and the minus terminals of the fuel pump, and they're just running straight out here outside the car up here to my bench. And I have these RC car batteries that I'm going to be hooking up to it. So right now is the moment of truth. I'm going to hook it up and see if we can get any noise. I also have my fire extinguisher ready. Okay, here we go. Oh, there's something. Yep, I hear fluid. It sounds like something's leaking. Okay, down here under the car, it looks like it's that return. Yeah, it's coming out of this right here. This is the return line, and I did not tighten that. I'm going to try that again. I hear gurgling. No leaks, and back here I'm seeing something on this gauge. I got 5. It just so happens I made these wires long enough so I can operate this back here. So I can turn the pump on right now. and I can hear a little bit of bubbling. There may not be enough fuel in the tank, so let's just leave this on. Okay guys, we're building some pressure back here, but it seems kind of inconsistent. I'm not getting a whole lot on the upper gauge. This one has a check valve on it, so if I open this up, you know, I'm getting a lot of bubbles out of here. So I am going to put some more fuel in the tank because I just don't think there's enough. I only got 1 gallon in there. Okay, now I have 3 gallons in the tank, so I shouldn't be sucking up air bubbles. Let's just give it a connection, make sure this valve is closed. And let's get some air out of the system and check the pressures. So it's running now, and I can hear things circulating. This gauge here is about 3.5 psi, and this gauge here actually says about 4, and that's kind of weird. This gauge should be higher, and this is the oil pressure gauge I use in my engine, and it only goes up to 30. I might have damaged this gauge, so I'm going to shut it off and swap this one out. Take some of the pressure out. So that's down to 0. Okay, a little gas out of that one. Rest in peace. This is another gauge, 0 to 30 psi. Plug this guy here in. Valve is closed. Oh yeah. So now I'm getting 9 psi here, and I'm getting about same 3, almost 3.5 here. If I open this valve, fuel starts to flow and the pressure basically stays the same. Unless I really open it up. I can hear the spring moving in the regulator, but if I really open it up, it'll drop down to about 1. Fuel pump is on right now. Like I said, this is reading about 9. And this one's reading about 3, almost 3.5. I'm gonna try to adjust this one down. I don't think it'll go much lower, but I'm gonna try. So that's 10. I'm going down now. That's about 7, 5. You can hear the fuel pump is making a slightly different sound. That's about 5 right there. And now it seems to be doing less and less change, so I probably reached its limit. Yeah, so it won't go less than 5. And I'm pretty sure that's the specification on this regulator. So now I'm going to work on locking or changing the pressure on this one, see if I can regulate it down a little bit. Need a new wrench. Same number, about 3.75. And then I think each time you make an adjustment on this one, you need to, let it flow a little bit. Yep, closer to 3. It's almost exactly 3. You can really dial this thing in. Go a little bit less. It's 2.75. I mean, that's probably a good starting point. I'll double check the Weber specifications. I know for Solex it should be like 2.5 to 3. Right there, 2.75. This is another battery. This is a little bit higher voltage. This one's about 13 volts. So I'm going to alter the voltage and see what happens with the fuel pressure. Higher pitch, a little bit noisy actually, but the exact same fuel pressure, 2.75. Open up a little bit of fuel flow. It's a lot of fuel coming out. Exactly where it started. About, yep, 2.5, 2.6, roughly the same. There's diaphragms inside these regulators and they are shifting all the time to give you the exact pressure you want. I just emptied what was in here back into the tank. It was all clean, no real debris. The first time I drained it, there was some debris in the lines. That fuel I threw away. So I'm gonna open the valve all the way and we'll see how long it takes. 1, 2, 3, on. It's a lot of fuel coming out. It's about 1.5 psi. And there it's off. So we'll go back at the video and look at how much time it took to fill this cup. There's no way this 912 engine can take that much fuel. There's no particulate or any weird things in there, so this is nice and clean. It's kind of good to purge out the system. And then when I clamp this meter on here, it says 4.1 amps, which is within spec on the fuel pump. I think it says maximum of like 10. But given it's running at a low pressure, that sounds reasonable. So that's cool. This gauge here, I'm not going to leave it in place. It kind of looks cool, but it's probably a safety issue if the gauge was ever to fail and spray liquid all over or fuel all over the engine. That could be bad. I think it makes sense to attach it to the engine and not the car, because when the 912 engine goes, this regulator will no longer be needed. The bracket that comes with that fuel pressure regulator is pretty close to working really well. So there's these 4 holes in the back. I can pick up one of them with an existing hole on the back of the fan shroud, but I'm going to extend this bracket over to pick up another hole that's also already there on the fan shroud, so I don't have to drill and cut any holes in that part. Just take off a little bit of the zinc plating so we can TIG weld that on there. Well, this looks great, but I welded it on the wrong side. So, got to cut it off. Shoot. This right here is the hole I need. Now let's just cut it off. It might be a little hard to see what was done here because the engine's kind of back up here against the wall. It's pretty dark back here, but this is the bracket. This hole right here was already here for, on this side of the engine, this is where the filler canister goes. And this is where the coil bracket is. So it's this bolt and this bolt right here. And they're just carried through to the back of the fan shroud. And that's why I extended it over to reach this side here. There's the regulator mounted on the back of the fan shroud. This line here is just going to carry right over to this carburetor right here. Not even sure if it's worthwhile making a hard line. Probably just use the German hose line. And then same for this side right here, right over to there. That should be real simple connection. And then this is the one that goes to the Holley regulator. Once the engine's installed, this is going to be a quick connection and we should have fuel pressure. Here on the first drive to-do list, we have the rear lines have now been completed. So we can cross those off. And then leak check, we got that done as well. This fuel system is highly modified. Going from the relocation of the fuel pump from the rear of the car, which was a horrible place, right into the tank is a much more modern way to do it. I think it works better with today's ethanol fuels. I think it has better reliability since there's some cooling on the fuel pump. And the fuel pump is actually easy to replace. There's just a couple screws. It comes right out of the top of the tank. And I'm going to be retrofitting it also with a relay style electrical supply so it doesn't really put any more strain on the ignition switch that it doesn't already have. So there's a lot of improvements going on in the fuel system. Also, I completely changed those plastic lines that were in the tunnel from the nylon to stainless steel, AN fittings throughout. You know, once those things are tight, they will not leak. All new hoses, all new regulation in the back with dual regulators. It'll run either my carbureted engine, a 911 carbureted engine, or it'll go all the way up to EFI. So that's really cool. The things that are remaining to do are going to be on the filler neck on the tank. I did get a leak there. It's just metal to metal contact. I have some EDPM rubber sheets. I just need to cut the holes into it, create the oval, and secure that correctly with a number of screws around the perimeter. That'll solve that leak. And then I also need to come up with a fuel tank vent system. I don't have the stock charcoal canister, but I will vent something out to the fender and probably use some kind of aftermarket vapor canister just so it doesn't smell too bad in the garage. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you soon. Happy holidays.